Let's get right into it. Number 10, the year the sun vanished. Imagine waking up one morning, throwing open your window, and instead of sunlight, you get greeted by a creepy orange haze that looks like the world's biggest candle just burned out. That was the vibe in the year 536 AD, which historians casually call the worst year to be alive. And honestly, they might be underselling it. Here's what happened. A mysterious volcanic eruption, probably somewhere in Iceland, blew enough ash into the atmosphere to dim the sun for over a year. Think of it like putting sunglasses on the entire planet, except they were the kind of sunglasses that also kill your crops and make everyone depressed. Ancient writers from Europe to China recorded that the sun gave forth its light without brightness, like a mood lamp on its last legs. Now, this wasn't just an inconvenience, like, I can't tan this summer. No, this was a global agricultural horror show. Crops failed across Europe, Asia, and even the Middle East. Imagine watching your fields of wheat turn into withered stick figures while your stomach plays Feed Me on loop. Famine swept across continents, and when people are starving, they don't exactly write upbeat Yelp reviews about their governments. Whole empires wobbled. The Byzantine Empire almost toppled. And just when people thought, okay, maybe this nightmare haze will clear and life will go back to normal, boom, plague. The Justinian plague, a bubonic catastrophe, kicked in just a few years later and casually removed about a third to half of the Mediterranean population. Like, Mother Nature wasn't just throwing shade, she was throwing the whole toolbox at humanity. Psychologically, the effect must have been insane. Imagine your entire world dimming, your food disappearing, and everyone around you whispering, "The gods are angry." It's basically an apocalypse simulator minus the cool video game respawns. And here's the kicker. Modern scientists have analyzed tree rings and ice cores, and they back it up. The year 536 was legitimately one of the coldest and darkest in recorded history. So yeah, we almost checked out as a species thanks to an Icelandic volcano's surprise party. Next time you complain about daylight savings messing with your schedule, just remember, at least the sun still works.
Number 9. The night the world shook. You know those cheesy disaster movies where the ground splits open and swallows people whole? Turns out, that's not just Hollywood special effects. In 1201 AD, the Eastern Mediterranean basically decided to do its best impression of a shaken snow globe. This was one of the most violent earthquakes in history, hitting somewhere between 7.6 and 7.9 on the Richter scale. And remember, this was a world with zero modern buildings. People lived in stone and mud brick houses, basically human-sized Jenga towers just waiting for a bad move. The epicenter was near Egypt and Syria, and the death toll? Around 1 million. Let me repeat that, 1 million. In a medieval world with far fewer people, that's like wiping out an entire modern city in one giant rock and roll concert from hell. Cities collapsed, entire regions lost infrastructure, and famine followed because, well, you can't exactly farm when the ground keeps rearranging itself like a bored interior designer. The psychological side of this disaster is mind-bending. Earthquakes are uniquely terrifying because they attack your one assumption, that the ground beneath you is solid. Your brain loves certainty. It wants to believe that standing on the earth is safer than balancing on a table. But then the earth suddenly moves and your nervous system goes, "Excuse me, what?" That's why earthquakes leave such a lasting cultural scar. Whole communities start building superstitions around them. Sacrifices increase. People blame divine wrath. In fact, some chroniclers at the time described it as a literal punishment from God. Entire cities were swallowed, they said, like the earth had a grudge. And here's the kicker. This disaster hit right in the middle of Crusades-era politics. Already fragile alliances shattered like clay pots because, let's be honest, nothing kills diplomacy faster than both sides starving after the same earthquake. The ripple effects of that quake reshaped trade, food supplies, and even political borders for decades. Imagine your world shaking for a few minutes, but the aftershocks in politics, food, faith last for a generation. That's the kind of disaster that almost breaks civilizations. Basically, the Earth had a full-on temper tantrum and humans were the toys scattered across the room.
Number 8. The summer that wasn't. Picture this.
You've been waiting all year for the warmth of summer, ready to ditch the wool, eat fresh fruit, maybe enjoy a medieval version of iced coffee, which is probably just water that wasn't boiling hot. But then summer shows up and doesn't. That's what happened in 1816, which literally went down in history as the year without a summer. The culprit? Mount Tambora in Indonesia, which exploded in 1815 with the force of about 100 nuclear bombs. It was the biggest volcanic eruption in recorded history, and the ash cloud it launched basically put Earth in a cold storage locker. Crops failed everywhere. North America, Europe, Asia. Snow fell in June in New England. Frost killed cornfields in July. People were like, oh, so weather just doesn't exist anymore? Cool. Now, here's where it gets both tragic and kind of hilariously human. Starvation hit hard, and food riots broke out across Europe. In Switzerland, desperate people were eating cats, dogs, and literally boiling grass into soup. Your brain doesn't exactly love adapting to, oh, hey, your dinner is now weeds. And psychologically, this turns society feral. Imagine going from gossiping about your neighbor's cow to fighting them for a turnip. But weirdly, the cultural side effects are legendary. With no summer sunshine to frolic in, people stayed indoors more. And what do humans do when they're bored, cold, and trapped inside? They get creative. Mary Shelley, stuck inside with friends during the miserable Swiss summer, invented Frankenstein. That's right, the greatest Gothic horror novel of all time exists because the sun took a vacation. Also, Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism, claimed his visions happened in this very climate of desperation. Basically, a whole bunch of our cultural quirks sprouted from volcanic winter. And here's a mind melt. Scientists think this disaster helped inspire the invention of the bicycle. Why? Because horses were dying of starvation, and suddenly everyone was like, okay, plan B, 2 wheels and pedals. So yeah, the bike you ride for fun on Sundays? Thank Mount Tambora for the chain reaction of starvation, boredom, and desperation that created it. In short, one volcano stole summer, nearly starved half the globe, and accidentally gave us Frankenstein and bicycles. Humanity's ability to spiral and innovate at the same time is truly unmatched.
Number 7, the ocean that ate the world. Everyone talks about tsunamis like they're rare one-off nightmares, but rewind to 2004 and you'll see a modern reminder that the ocean can go full monster mode. The Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami hit with a force that made skyscrapers look like Lego towers, and the death toll? Around 230,000 people across 14 countries. That's a whole stadium of human lives gone in hours. But this script is about forgotten disasters, so let's rewind even further. In 1600 BCE, the island of Thera, modern-day Santorini, exploded in one of the most devastating volcanic events in history. Scientists believe the eruption triggered a colossal tsunami that smashed into Crete and other parts of the Aegean. Entire fleets, cities, and cultures got shredded. Some historians even think this disaster helped wipe out the Minoan civilization, one of the most advanced Bronze Age societies, complete with plumbing, art, and trade networks. Psychologically, imagine being a Minoan fisherman. One morning you see the sea retreat like it's pulling a dramatic "I'm out" exit. You walk out to grab stranded fish, and suddenly the ocean comes roaring back like a freight train. Your brain has no defense against that because everything you thought was stable, the sea, your crops, your trade routes, just drowns in one massive gulp. Here's the wild part. Some scholars think this tsunami might be the root of the Atlantis myth, a flourishing island culture suddenly obliterated by waves and fire. Sounds familiar, right? Our species is so good at turning trauma into legends that thousands of years later, Plato might have been recycling this catastrophe as allegory. Fast forward to today and the lesson's the same. The ocean has receipts, and when it cashes them in, humanity barely clings on. Every culture with coastal history, Japan, Polynesia, Native Americans, has myths of water swallowing the land. And behind each myth, there's probably a forgotten tsunami or two that nearly ended someone's civilization. So yeah, next time you stand at the beach feeling all peaceful and zen, remember, the ocean is basically a giant blue predator that occasionally gets bored and swallows cities whole. Number 6. The death cloud that smothered people alive. Okay, so you know how you sometimes get annoyed by bad air quality warnings? Like, oh no, smog today, better not jog. Well, imagine air quality so bad it literally lays people flat on the ground unconscious before killing them. Welcome to Lake Nyos, 1986, Cameroon. Here's what went down. Lake Nyos was sitting on top of volcanic activity that had been slowly charging the water with carbon dioxide like a giant soda stream nobody asked for. One night, without warning, the lake burped. Yes, burped, and released a massive invisible cloud of CO2. This deadly gas cloud crept across villages, silently suffocating everything in its path. Cows keeled over mid-chew, birds dropped like stones, and about 1,700 people died in their sleep or while walking outside. And the creepiest part? They didn't even know what was happening. Imagine you're walking home from visiting a neighbor, and suddenly your lungs stop cooperating. No fire, no explosion, no warning, just air turning against you. Your brain has no way to rationalize that. For survivors, the trauma wasn't just losing people, it was the sheer mystery of it. The air killed them doesn't compute. Psychologically, this disaster still haunts. Survivors reported intense PTSD because it felt supernatural, like the earth itself wanted them gone. And culturally, it reinforced a universal fear, the idea that something invisible can snuff you out without mercy. Scientists now monitor other volcanic lakes for similar burbs because, yes, the planet is just casually hiding more death bubbles under the surface. Comforting, right? The Lake Nyos disaster nearly wiped out entire villages and reminded humanity that sometimes the scariest monsters aren't waves or quakes, they're invisible gases lurking in your own backyard. Basically, Mother Nature said, who needs lava when I can weaponize air?
Number 5. The Black Death's terrifying encore. Everybody knows the Black Death of the 14th century, when the bubonic plague carted off about 50 million people in Europe. But here's the part people forget. It wasn't a one-hit wonder. The plague came back, again and again and again, like the world's worst concert tour nobody bought tickets for. One of its nastiest encores hit in the 17th century, especially in London during 1665. Known as the Great Plague of London, it killed about 100,000 people in less than 2 years, roughly a quarter of the city's population. Picture every fourth person you know dropping dead while the survivors lock themselves inside and paint crosses on their doors. And the psychology? Off the charts. Fear was so overwhelming that families abandoned sick relatives. Physicians wore those freaky bird beak masks stuffed with herbs because, hey, if you're going to fail at medicine, at least look creepy doing it. People genuinely believed bad smells carried the disease, so they carried flowers or burned incense everywhere. Basically, your coping mechanism was walk around smelling like a potpourri store while your neighbors collapsed. The social breakdown was brutal. Dogs and cats were killed en masse because people thought they spread the plague. Ironically, killing the cats probably made the rat problem worse, which means, yep, people literally sabotaged themselves while trying to fix it. Classic humanity move. The psychological scarring was so intense that it reshaped European culture. London's Great Fire in 1666 almost felt like mercy. Burning down huge parts of the city actually helped kill off lingering plague pockets. But that mental scar, that sense that death could roll through at random, lingered for centuries. So yeah, the plague wasn't just a one-time apocalypse, it was a repeat offender, popping up like the world's most horrifying subscription service. Congrats, your free trial of bubonic horror has renewed.
Number 4. The comet that made everything burn. Okay, so imagine this. You're living in a nice little village, doing your prehistoric thing, when suddenly the sky decides to yeet fireballs at Earth. That's basically what scientists think happened around 12,800 years ago during what's called the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. The theory goes that a comet or fragments of one slammed into the Earth, triggering continent-wide wildfires so massive they made today's Amazon fires look like a candle accident. We're talking clouds of ash, soot, and a sudden return to near Ice Age conditions. The timing lines up suspiciously well with the collapse of the Clovis culture in North America, a people who, up until then, were thriving as some of the earliest widespread hunter-gatherers. Then, poof, gone. Now, if you're a prehistoric human, your mental toolbox for "why is the sky on fire" is limited. You don't have astrophysics, you have stories. That's why so many ancient myths talk about gods raining fire, floods following fire, or a great reset. The psychological effect of seeing the sky betray you is enormous. It tells your brain, nothing is safe, not even the heavens. This potential cataclysm might even be the root of humanity's obsession with apocalyptic myths. Floods, fire, wrath from above. They all carry echoes of an actual cosmic tantrum that nearly erased entire cultures. So yeah, whenever you wish on a shooting star, just remember, one of its cousins may have almost barbecued civilization.
Number 3, the Dust Bowl that starved dreams. Fast forward to the 1930s when America wasn't fighting a meteor, but its own bad farming habits. Enter the Dust Bowl, a decade-long ecological disaster that made the Great Depression even grimmer. Farmers had plowed up millions of acres of prairie grass to grow wheat because, hey, money. But prairie grass wasn't just decoration, it anchored the soil. Combine ripped-up roots with a drought, and suddenly the wind has free rein to scoop up the earth and redecorate the atmosphere. Cue massive black blizzards of dust storming across the Great Plains, blotting out the sun like a low-budget version of 536 AD. The storms destroyed crops, killed livestock, and literally suffocated people. Dust pneumonia became a thing. Yes, you could die just from breathing too much dirt. Entire towns packed up and left, with thousands of families migrating west in a desperate search for survival. The psychological toll? Utter despair. Imagine watching your house fill with sand every day, sweeping it out only for it to come back tomorrow like a cosmic prank you didn't sign up for. Families lived in constant survival mode, rationing food, wearing wet cloths over their faces, praying their lungs wouldn't give out. Dreams of prosperity turned into nightmares of dirt and coughing fits. And here's the kicker. People called it the Dirty 30s. They literally gave their trauma a nickname. Generations grew up associating survival with hardship and grit, shaping American culture's obsession with resilience and self-reliance. So yeah, the Dust Bowl didn't just wreck farmland, it nearly buried the American dream under a mountain of dirt.
Number 2, the flood that erased cities. Every culture has a flood myth. Noah's Ark, Gilgamesh's epic, Hindu tales of Manu, even Native American stories. They all talk about the world drowning. And here's the thing, they weren't all just making it up for drama. Scientists now think there was a massive flood event about 7,600 years ago when the Mediterranean Sea broke through the Bosporus and flooded into the Black Sea basin. Imagine living in a peaceful lakeside community. Then one day the shoreline doesn't just creep up, it races at you like it's late for work. Whole villages vanished under rising water. Survivors would have fled in panic, carrying their trauma into oral traditions that spiraled into myth. And water trauma sticks. Your brain loves stability, and nothing says stability like the sea stays where it belongs. When it doesn't, your worldview shatters. People centuries later are still writing about it in sacred texts. This wasn't just local. It changed migration patterns. Populations spread into Europe and Asia, carrying their stories of wrathful gods, divine floods, and second chances. Civilization may have survived, but the near drowning left fingerprints all over our religious DNA. So yeah, next time you hear a cozy bedtime story about Noah's Ark, remember, it probably started with somebody screaming, "Run!" as their entire village drowned.
Number 1. The pandemic we pretend to forget. Everyone thinks pandemics are just recent trauma. COVID, SARS, Ebola. But let's talk about the Spanish flu of 1918. Forgotten by history classes, overshadowed by World War I, but in raw numbers, this thing was a civilization wrecker. 50 million people died in just 2 years. That's more than the war it coincided with. Entire towns lost most of their population. Hospitals overflowed, bodies piled up, and families had to bury their own dead without ceremony. Psychologically, it was devastating. People wore masks, sound familiar? Schools shut down, and fear of your own breath became normal. Some communities banned public gatherings, others resorted to desperate superstitions. In an age when medicine was just figuring out bacteria, the idea of a virus felt like witchcraft. And yet, after it ended, humanity kind of shoved it under the rug. There were no giant memorials, no statues. Why? Because people were already drowning in war trauma. They didn't want to remember another apocalypse layered on top. So it slipped into cultural amnesia, like a nightmare you force yourself to forget. But here's the kicker. That pandemic helped shape modern public health, vaccine development, and even the way cities plan sanitation. Civilization limped forward, but it came dangerously close to breaking. Basically, the Spanish flu was the horror movie sequel to the Black Death, except this time humanity just said, let's not talk about it, and hoped no one would ask. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.